Toxic Rain Pathfinder has performed really well so far in Necropolis League. I completed all of the tier 17 maps in the first week of the league about a week ago at the time I'm recording this. I meant to put a video out about that sooner, but I kind of just got distracted talking about currency stuff. Hi, it's Llarold, and I'm going to talk about Toxic Rain Pathfinder and how it's doing right now and give a updated level 100 path of building, but first don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, we've gotten a lot of requests for that level 100 POB and a lot of questions about how to make the build tankier, so that's what I'm going to focus on in this video. I'll start out actually by talking about the MTX because that's probably been the most asked question, and yeah, it's kind of fun, right? And fun is why we play games, I think. So let's just start there. I like the Night Lotus Toxic Rain MTX. I have them all. I like them all. I switch back and forth between them all, but as you can kind of see from the character, I kind of go with the whole purple theme. So Night Lotus for the Toxic Rain, and what is this? Celestial Caustic Arrow? Yeah, Celestial Caustic Arrow. Nice purple look to everything. Now for the armor, I like the Nightfall whole armor set. I think it looks really, really good. I've turned off all the auras so I can actually see it instead of my usual massive aura spam. But yeah, it looks really, really, really nice. Purple, good looking. There isn't really a bow and quiver that matches it, unfortunately. I've been playing around with like the Karui or the Cold Snap. Both of those look okay. I have looked at some, but there's nothing that really matches this stuff perfectly. Unfortunately, the Nightfall weapon is like melee weapons only, sword, dagger, wand, that kind of thing. As for the glows around my character that I've gotten asked about a lot, there's this one, this very faint little blue glow that shows up a little better in other lighting environments. Turquoise Pendant of Willpower, scales with your energy shield. And then there is Sapphire and Topaz flasks. We'll turn this on here. The Reinforced Sapphire Flask gives you this nice like blue icy glow around your character whenever you have a Sapphire Flask active, which is like all the time as a Pathfinder. And the Topaz one, if we tap 2 again to turn off that other flask, tap 3 here, there we go. So you can see like very lightning themed, sort of, you know, it's, what can you say? It's a lightning resistance flask, and now you got a big lightning circle around you. I think they look pretty good, and I think they really look like cool together as well. I like all of the resistance flask circle aura things. I think they all look pretty cool. As for pets, like as always, Celestial Kitty Cat, it looks great. And then I'm doing the Nightfall Dragon for the whole purple theme as well. It's all very purple, right? The other set that I've played around with some, big fan of, is the black and white set. I just think it looks really good. It doesn't match everything as nicely, but you know, if I turn those two, if I turn those two flask MTX off so I can actually see my character here, looks really good. Really, really good looking set. Again, no like matching bow or quiver though, unfortunately, and no matching skill MTX at all. So it does stick out a little bit, but it kind of helps me see my character through all the mess, so that's good too. I use kind of a mixture of like the Sunrise Aura effect and the Sun Aura effect, and then the Celestial Aura and Divergence Aura and Nightfall auras. Like all of those are my collection of auras, so it's a bunch of orange and purple all together. Kind of just turns into a visual blob and definitely gets in the way of seeing what I'm doing with the minimap in the middle of the screen. Like it would definitely be a lot easier to see if I had no MTX on for all of my auras at all. Actually pay to lose, but it's worth it. I like it. And then one thing that is genuinely pay to win for your eardrums is the Huntsman Immortal Call. If you have Immortal Call hooked up to I don't have sound on right now, and I don't have it very loud compared to my microphone anyways, but if you have Immortal Call hooked up to automation support, it's loud. It's disruptively, annoyingly loud. There are, I think, only 2 options for MTX for Immortal Call. The Angelic one is less loud, but still kind of loud. The Huntsman one is significantly quieter. I wish there was a way to just have a no sound at all option. That would be brilliant. But Huntsman Immortal Call, genuinely actual, like, pay to preserve your eardrums, like, genuinely good. All right, I think that's about it, about, like, how my character looks. I now want to talk about, like, the level 100 build and just kind of some thoughts about the character as it's progressed through the league. I'm still really, like, vibing with it. I'm definitely going to be playing it more as the league goes on. I haven't, like, hit level 100 and I'm done. Like, I've hit level 100 and now it's time to start playing. I feel like I cleared tier 17s pretty comfortably. I used a very like baby tree. I had none of these map mod effect nodes up top. I took Packed with Energy, this Nico node, and I forced Nico in all of my maps, and I basically just tried to skip through everything and get to the bosses and just clear those out. But with that being said, I did feel like I had a pretty good time with the bosses. I did these all at like level 95 or 96, I can't remember. I only had one cluster jewel at the time. I did have awakened gems, but I was still quite a way back from where I am now gear-wise. They're hard, but most of the difficulty comes from the trash. I really didn't have that much trouble with the bosses. I guess I should say the trash and the map mods, but I didn't really have that much trouble with the bosses. I am currently working through doing all the bosses with this absolutely ungodly passive tree here, and this tree on tier 17s, thanks to chiseled perfection and mounting modifiers, you're getting somewhere between like 6 and 8 mods on every map. You get about 90% increased map mod effect with this every single map mod node taken, and then I'm also taking as many shrines as I can in this like challenge that I'm doing. And some of the shrine benefits can be really good. You get a divine shrine or something, that's pretty nice. You can clear out most of the map in the time that you're immune to damage. That's pretty good. But then a lot of the times, and I definitely will have already piped some footage in of me doing this, you will just get annihilated the moment that you like think about walking near a pack of mobs that are near a shrine. I did have both petrification statues as one of the map mods and massive lag spikes while doing the Uber Uhtred fight, and I somehow managed to, and also like the stress of it being my last portal because I'd gotten just like annihilated every time I tried to get near the boss room. But somehow I managed to face tank everything in that fight and live even while like I didn't really have control of my character. So definitely there's a real disconnect between the bosses and the trash in the maps. So in terms of the character, this is my current path building tree setup here. I do have quite a few tattoos. We'll go over those in a bit. And my skills haven't really changed much, right? I'm still using Toxic Rain. I've switched to a level 4 Empower. All my awakened gems are like leveled up, but not really all that much has changed like mechanically. I only have a level 3 Empower on the Vol Caustic Arrow. They're pretty expensive, level 4 Empowers. Level 21 Malevolence, though, that's been pretty good. I haven't upgraded all the rest of my gems to level 21, but I will at some point. I've made some upgrades to the character's gear. There's definitely still some more stuff that I want to upgrade, but the main thing, I talked about it in the last video, the last update, was the Tides of Time. I think I picked that up right before the video and hadn't really played with it. It's insane. It is everything I hoped it would be and wanted it to be. I think, you know, the idea of playing with a Mage Blood or a Headhunter instead of this, I will farm them just because it's fun to do and they're kind of a chase item, something that I want. But I actually think that this belt clears both of them for Pathfinders because it is more consistent than Headhunter and it works on unique flasks unlike Mage Blood. That means you can use Taste of Hate and Progenesis and get massively increased effect and guaranteed uptime on all of your flasks by using this belt that is 5 divines with good rolls as opposed to a Mage Blood that's like closer to 200. And that is like part of the benefit here. It is cheap. You can buy and double corrupt these and feel a lot better doing that, and I am planning still to do that. I've just been saving up for a Progenesis for a little bit. I picked that up right before making this video, and I have played around with it just like a couple of maps just to kind of feel how much tankier it makes you. I did not have Progenesis for any of the tier 17s that I've done yet. I am going to go into some tier 17s with it and just like marvel at how much tankier I feel. I basically do feel like I'm made of stone compared to how I was before. As for my clusters, I'm using Chaos medium clusters, Chaos big clusters, of course. I'm using the 1 flask effect duration cluster as is typical, but then just 3 medium chaos clusters, and that's because I'm still in the process or still at the point where I need to use Student of Decay to cap my chaos res. I did drop this wheel here, the wasting wheel, which I like. It's really good, but at level 100 it is a little bit weaker for damage. You know, it gives you some chaos res, which is really good when you're getting your gear up and running, but since I switched over to Progenesis here, that chaos res is over the cap, and you know, I don't feel like I need it, and that allowed me to take Atrophy, which is a lot better for damage. This is a more expensive wheel, you know, 5 points as opposed to 3, but it is more damage per point. Now, when I was like level 98, that was when I switched over to the second cluster jewel setup. I just dropped Atrophy, I dropped Growth and Decay, this wheel here, just dropped that, dropped a lot of like Aspect of the Eagle, not really that great of a of a point either. You know, the main thing to look at when you're comparing a lot of these damage wheels, a lot of these damage nodes, is to look at the combined DPS all the way down there at the very bottom. I can't mouse over it to show it, or I would move off of the icon there, but you want to look at the amount of damage that you're getting per point. If it's like 3% or less, that's not essential. 3% or more is where it's like, you know, that's quite a bit more valuable. But yeah, 2.5% damage per point is not game changing in terms of a build. It's definitely something you feel like you can lose if you're not also losing like defensive value. You know, auras, you losing 2.5% damage per point, and then also a bunch of defensive value. You want to keep those notes. Now, as for like upgrading clusters long term, I will try to fix my chaos res just with better gear. And then instead of using these chaos damage over time clusters, I would switch over to projectile damage clusters, and I will show off that in Craft of Exile here. So the ideal clusters would be, not jewelry, cluster jewels. Here we go. Medium cluster jewels. This would be projectile damage all the way near the end. And there's only two useful notables on it, but it's Shrieking Bolts and Repeater. They just add a ton of damage, a ton of projectile damage and attack and cast speed from Repeater, and then just a ton of projectile damage from Shrieking Bolts, and that is actually better for both Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain. That projectile damage does apply to your, well, to both of those skills, and it does actually give you a little bit more damage. We're only talking about 1% or 2%, but for every single cluster jewel, you're getting like 1.5% here, and you know, it adds up a bit over time. And if you're not needing Student of Decay to fix your chaos res anymore, then I mean, that's basically like 3 to 5% more free damage just by switching over to those. As I have said, I have used some tattoos, and I'm going to talk about those now. I'm using a Corrupted Lightning Coil with the corruption that gives you 50% reduced extra damage from crits. And so I have filled every single one of my int nodes on the tree with the tattoo of the Rongokurai turtle to give me 5% reduced extra damage from crits, for a total of, if we look here in game, 90% reduced extra crit damage reduction. So I didn't have all of these in at the time. I think I had like 70% or something, and I played around with a tier 17 map that had increased map bot effect and the insane tier 17 crit chance and crit multiplier effect, and basically every single time I got crit, I was like instantly dead from full. But since having gotten to 90% and then going around and playing with stuff even before having the Progenesis, I found myself just totally trivializing any sort of crit mods. Having all that crit damage reduction really makes crit into a kind of a non-mod, which is really great because it is so nasty. So being able to like zero that out feels really, really good. It does take a lot of int from your gear, but if you can manage to swing it, it's a really good thing. And then sort of some more like usable tattoos are tattoos of the Tahua Herbalist. You only need, I only needed one of these with Tides of Time and this wheel here, Careful Conservationist, and then this over here, Profane Chemistry. I only needed one of these to guarantee 100% uptime on all of my flasks, but I took 3 because I could afford it spell suppression wise, and it just kind of gives you a little bit of like a spillover. I have also used 1 Tattoo of the Ramako Shaman to get some spell suppression instead of some dexterity, and that's sort of something you kind of want to balance out. Like Magebane gives you a spell suppression based on your dex, so for every 3 dex nodes that you drop, that's 2% less suppression that you have, so you kind of have to compensate with that with some Tattoos of the Ramako Shaman. It's kind of a bit of a dance, something you have to play with in Pathobuilding on your own. I also have this Watcher's Eye. It is a phasing while affected by haste Watcher's Eye. That's really not a super valuable mod because it doesn't add any damage, and I like it because it just adds a form of utility that I really like. It's also got Fizz taken as cold while affected by Purity of Elements, which is really the main thrust here, right? You can get something that gives you a ton of utility, like just defensive utility, and doesn't cost anything. It also has non-channeling skills have minus mana cost while affected by clarity, so I'm not making any use of that right now, but if I were to switch over to mana, then that would be useful as well. I would obviously need to div this. I just haven't felt like throwing Natural Divines into it, but it's a minimum roll on both the, well, almost a minimum roll on the clarity and actually a minimum roll on the Purity of Elements, so I would want to slap this with at least 1 Divine and try and get both of those numbers up. But yeah, I just haven't done that yet. I also picked up a Flesh and Flame. I kind of got these, I wouldn't say for a bargain. I think I spent 50 or 60 divines on these, and I was gonna get a Headhunter, I was gonna get a Progenesis, I was gonna get whatever other stuff than these, and then I was like, you know what? I love how it feels to have Gathering Winds when you're not playing a Deadeye. It really does make you feel just so insanely fast. And so I went ahead and got those instead, and that kind of put me behind for about a couple more days on the Progenesis plans. As I said, all of my skill gems are basically all the same as they have been. I think the only real upgrades I've made is just the level 4 Empower and kind of getting all of the Awakened gems to level 5, and then I just bought a level 21 Malevolence from somebody, but most of the rest of the stuff is pretty much the same. You kind of want to tailor your Immortal Call and your Flame Dash to whatever your int and strength maximums are. I guess I changed my int around a little bit so I can actually level Flame Dash up another time or two. Probably should quality that up a bit as well for more cooldown reduction. So in terms of switching over to mana, I might do it just because of the quality of life of being able to use Mana Forged Arrows and only have like one keybind for all of your clearing and stuff. You probably will do more damage with that play style, just needing to use fewer keybinds to do all of your skills. I'm really enjoying the build as it is, though. I don't feel like I need to change it at all, and maybe I won't. I don't know. In terms of gear, I feel like I need still to upgrade. The amulet really is like holding me down now. Rog made this for me in the first couple of days of the league, and it was good then, but it's pretty bad now. I think graveyard crafting is genuinely an option, and I have put together just like, I didn't really do much to make this. I just went to the actually, I'll just show how I got there. All right, so you go to Calculator in Pathofexile, and you want to put together an item. You do all the normal stuff that you would. You click all the stats that you want to have: Chaos Skills, Skill Gems, and dot multi, let's say rank 2. And then you can click this button here, Graveyard, and then you just click Quick Suggest, and it will suggest what corpses to throw in to make that. And then you can press Generate a Sample Item, and that will generate some sample items, and you'll see how often it hits it. Now, unfortunately, I don't want to do it exactly like this. I want to have at least one explicit modifier free. So I would drop one explicit mod, I would go down to 5, and then I would probably want resistances as suffixes. So I'd probably drop all of the resistance modifiers and put in some of the meta mods to make it so that you have increased chance for suffix modifiers. I might actually do like several of those. Just to really skew it so that I have an empty prefix so that I can either put non-channeling skill cost or like increased AoE if I'm sticking with the Devouring Diadem, something like that. And as you can see, like, it's not perfect. It definitely will take some shots. I think one really good tip for playing around with the graveyard is to use any of the meta crafting mods that give you like a chance to create an extra item. That's really useful. Gives you more bites at the apple for all of the corpses that you're using. So I might only use like 80 of these recommended corpses and then throw in like 8 corpses to try and give myself maybe 3 items from this craft. That would be my plan. I have farmed an ungodly amount of corpses over the last couple of days, so that might actually be something I start working on over the weekend. As for other pieces that are like big upgrades left to do, again, this quiver was one that I was very happy with. I crafted it with essences in the first week of the league. It's now quite bad by comparison, as it is aged into being trash. And I'll definitely have to make a hunter double dot multi quiver. That's going to suck. That's why I haven't done that yet. It's incredibly expensive. You know, it might cost 10, 20, 40, 50 divines to craft. It just depends on how good Harvest feels like being to me. And then I could just use like slightly better stats, similar stats, but slightly better stats on gloves and boots. And I probably will make, you know, I'll definitely need to make a nice helm whenever it becomes mana time. And finally, one of the questions I've seen a lot is a 250% Widowhail a good option? Like, does that work for this build? And I'll just pull up Widowhail to kind of talk about it. I absolutely think it is, by the way, just to kind of jump ahead to that. Widowhail is this bow. It is a crude bow, not a short bow, so it's a little bit slower in terms of attacks per second. But as you can see, 250% increased bonuses from equipped quiver. A perfect Widowhail, especially one that's like perfect and enchanted and corrupted, insanely expensive. Not a cheap option at all, and it is reliant on you having just a god tier quiver to make it work, since it's basically trying to increase all of those bonuses. The positives are huge damage, enormous, a massive amount of life. A quiver can have like 80-90 life on it. Like, this is a tier 2 mod here at 89, so you could have 95-99 life, and then that's getting increased by 2.5 times due to a perfect Widowhail. So really, really good offensively and defensively. The problem with it is just that until you have spent an absolutely insane amount of currency on both the quiver and the weapon, it's not really competitive with the like 5 to 10 divine thicket bow that you can make for yourself. And also you really need to work toward the adorned and 3 cluster jewels, and I'll pull that the adorned up here. This is a corrupted jewel that gives you 150% increased effective jewel socket passive skills containing corrupted magic jewels. So basically that just means if you have a bunch of jewels like this one here, right? This is a rare, but it has a fractured dot multi on it. So the way that you would make the adorned work is you would put in three cluster jewels, so you would have to path all the way down here and have a 3rd cluster jewel down there, and then you would buy a bunch of fractured dot multi or chaos dot multi jewels, and you would roll them until they had a prefix of increased maximum life and then a suffix of either dot multi or chaos dot multi, like this one over here. And then you would corrupt them and hope for good implicits, and then you would put that in every single jewel socket you possibly could, except for the one that has the adorned in it, and then that would increase your health significantly. You'd probably be sitting around 7 or 8k life. This is something that Ben did in, I think, Hardcore last league, and yeah, it's very, very strong approach to the build, but you know, it takes the cost of this, which is like, I mean, I'm probably playing with a couple hundred divines worth of stuff in this build right now. Not cheap. But I mean, it's like a 10x multiplier, a 20x or 50x multiplier on the cost of the build to get that running. It's very good though. It'll kill everything in the game without dying. So, you know, not too bad. All right, so that's my character. Now let's move on to the things that I think you can do to make yourself more tanky. And we'll just kind of run through a list of boxes you want to check. I think the most counterintuitive, but like important bit of advice here is just to increase your damage. Increasing your damage will improve your tankiness. Not in the literal sense, but enemies can't kill you if they're dead. That's actually not true in Path of Exile, but they are usually less dangerous if they are dead, and doing more damage reduces the threat level of enemies. Getting a +3 bow, just one of these bad boys right here, is far and away the most important priority when you're first gearing up. As for resistances, you know, you want to cap them, and you actually want to overcap them. Like I have a Topaz Flask on right now. Let's get that off here. As you can see from my resistances, I am significantly over the cap on cold and lightning resistance, and there's a reason for that. You take a ton of physical damage as lightning and cold due to lightning coil, due to taste of hate, due to running a Purity Watcher's Eye. So overcapping your resistances will help you prevent exposure effects, which will shred like 25 resists or so from you, from like suddenly destroying you by massively multiplying the amount of damage that you're taking by making all of that physical damage now do a bunch more, on top of also taking more of that elemental damage. I actually like to go, as you can see, for 60% overcap because of Blue Eldritch Altars. I like Blue Eldritch Altars. I like the player bonuses. I like the quant and rarity that they give. I like the duplication of scarabs and div cards and currency. I love them. But the downside that gives you -60 to cold and lightning res will absolutely murder you if you're not overcapped on cold and lightning res. I just want to be able to run all of the player altars without ever thinking about it and without ever really like looking at the downside. So I protect from those by overcapping by 60. And it's the same reason I don't use Blood Frenzy, at least right now. Blue Altar Frenzy Charge downside will basically remove all of your energy shield and evasion. It massively reduces your defenses, and that's energy shield and evasion, so you wouldn't be able to cast anything if you're still playing with Eldritch Battery. And this, I think, is why Purity of Elements works so well for the build. In addition to getting that Purity Watcher's Eye mod, it really helps you with the huge Ellie res requirements. This is a big part of why I don't love Petrified Blood either. It can work early on in gearing since the mana reservation cost is lower than Purity, but the strength requirement is very high. It's basically just a straight strength gem. And the life cost while you're above low life is also high. It can work. Some people like it, but I don't. I think of it as slightly a bit of defensive path of building bait. It isn't. It's an effective skill. People like it. I have played with it. It worked well. I just found it annoying, and I do think it can mislead you a bit. because you're not always at full health when you have petrified blood. Using flasks to help fix your resistances is really good, and because you're a Pathfinder, it's like preferred actually. So with that being said, you always want to check your map mods, because minus max res, reduced effect of non-curse auras, and less recovery rate of life and energy shield are all brutal mods. They're kind of well known as being just really, really nasty, but reduced flask charges generated is also insanely bad as a Pathfinder. You are relying on flasks for a huge amount of your defensive value, and losing that uptime is often deadly. All right, I already mentioned Lightning Coil, but I'll just reiterate that as a checkpoint here. It's a really strong unique, but it's common. So it's really good to have, and it's really easy to get good corruption mods on it, like this one right here, reduced extra damage taken from crits. You can also get increased maximum all res. Damage mods on Lightning Coil tend to be more expensive, and that's fine, right? We're focused more on staying alive on defenses here, and defensive corrupted mods on Lightning Coils just usually aren't that expensive. So you can buy a good corrupted Lightning Coil that isn't 6-linked or maybe even 6-socketed, and use tainted currency to 6-link it, and I'll just give like a brief tutorial on that. Basically what you'll do is you'll come over here to the crafting bench with that item, you'll throw it in here, and you'll just click 4 sockets. It'll cost 10 Jeweler's Orbs and 10 Vol Orbs. You set it to 4 sockets. Then you grab some tainted Jeweler's Orbs, you click them on there. If it goes up to 5 sockets, you just repeat until you get to 6. If it goes down to 3 sockets, then you go back to the crafting bench and you set it back to 4, and you just repeat that until you get 6. Then you do the exact same thing with fusing. So you set it to 4 links at the crafting bench, then you use tainted fusing orbs, which I would have just demonstrated all of this, but I just sold all of them right before I started working on this video. But you do the exact same thing. You set it to 4 link at the crafting bench, and then you use tainted fusings to craft it up to 5 and then up to 6. It's a super easy way, super inexpensive, or at least more inexpensive way to get yourself a really nice 6-link corrupted Lightning Coil for a fraction of the price that it would cost to buy one that's just already pre-made. All right, now I want to talk about flasks. These are kind of like the whole deal, right? That's kind of what the Ascendancy is. The Ascendancy is flasks. So first off, Life Flask, most important one. The prefix, this reduced recovery rate, increased amount recovered prefix, is absolutely mandatory. It is far superior to any other alternatives, and it is because this reduced recovery rate is actually a benefit for Pathfinder. The increased amount recovered from this is better than you're going to get from any other prefix, but also the rate being slower means that it lasts longer, which means you can maintain 100% uptime. No other prefix will give you that kind of defensive coverage. As for the bleed immune, that is the preferred approach. You can just put that on at benchcraft that on at Einhar's Menagerie. You just look for ceiling and then you put it on and you're pretty good to go. Taste of Hate is kind of the next mandatory flask. It gives you extremely high defensive value for really very low cost. You want to upgrade to a 15% fizz taken as cold. That first modifier is the only thing that matters on a Taste of Hate. And the difference between 10 and 15% is actually quite substantial. It is definitely worth it. But even if you're at absolutely the bare minimum, right, you're only able to afford a 10%, it's 30 chaos. It's very affordable for a very large increase in defensive value. And once you are able to afford a couple of divines to get that perfect one, it really is worth it. Now let's talk about resistance flasks. Topaz is very good. It helps offset the downside of Lightning Coil, the minus 60 lightning res, that brutal defensive downside of running a Lightning Coil just gets completely compensated for by a Topaz flask. And then the added max res that it provides makes that fizz to light conversion even more effective at reducing damage taken. You can also use flasks to kind of tailor your defensives based on bosses that you're doing. Like if you're doing Exarch deals mostly fire damage, so you would want to use a Ruby flask. Elder deals mostly cold damage, so if you don't have a Taste of Hate already, you would want to use at least a Magic Sapphire flask. You kind of want to, use defensive flasks to help with bosses, and that is sort of why we don't really care for Jade Flask. Jade Evasion, it's good as a defensive layer when you're bouncing around in maps. It's good enough to justify using Grace. It's not really good enough to justify using a Jade Flask outside of the very opening weekend of a league because, yeah, you get more damage reduction out of all of the elemental resistance flasks and just more value out of other options. It's also very, very weak for bossing. Most bosses don't really do a lot of evadable damage. Silver and Quicksilver Flask are both, I mean, for me, they're mandatory. I like to live fast and die often, so Silver and Quicksilver are definitely mandatory for me. Silver is huge for damage. That onslaught does scale with your flask effect. Quicksilver is technically not necessary. You could run Topaz, Ruby, or Jade Flask, I guess, is Jade instead of Quicksilver. The main thing here is that dropping Quicksilver will make you move slower. Like, as I'll show off, you know, you can see the difference is quite substantial. I think dropping Quicksilver makes a lot of sense for content where you're actually not trying to zoom, like bosses or tier 17s if you're still progressing through them. I think, just kind of thinking about it, doing like Exarch's Ball Phase with the Quicksilver going can actually be more difficult than doing it without. Like, I think just thinking about sometimes when I've done Exarch and done it like successfully and not had any problems, having like a Mage Blood, Quicksilver, super speed definitely makes it a lot more challenging. This is a pretty normal thing to do. I hate to go slow, so I rarely overdo it, but I do see it often, and I think it's a good idea if you're focusing on survival. The Progenesis is the best in slot. It is so far and away the best in slot option. It's also like 70 divines. It's not reasonable to recommend that early on in a build's life cycle, but it is an incredible in-game goal. Not to oversell it, but it basically makes you stop dying. Now, in terms of flask prefixes for your magic flasks, increased charge recovery, as you can see here, that is the best in slot option. It will do the most to increase your uptime, but reduced charges used and increased duration are both okay. Flask suffixes are really the more important thing. You absolutely want to have attack speed. It is such a huge damage increase to have attack speed on one of your magic flasks. And I think avoiding stuns, chance to avoid being stunned, is really mandatory as well. You can get that as like a native roll, or you can craft it on if you unveil it from Cinder Swallow Urns from Katarina. I think both of these are mandatory. Attack speed and chance to avoid being stunned, I don't really think you can get away with not using them. The only other thing that I would even consider using instead of either of these would be reduced effect of curses. Maybe I would run that instead of like chance to avoid being... I can't imagine ever wanting to not run chance to avoid being stunned, really, ever. So I guess I could run it instead of attack speed if there was some situation where I was really just purely focused on staying alive and I knew I was going to be dealing with some kind of horrible curses, like a tier 17 map that has all of the curses on players. Maybe I could see running a reduced cursed effect instead of attack speed. That would be the only time I could think of doing that. Normally I would just run 3 magic flasks and have those 3 suffixes. Okay, the Tides of Time. I already mentioned it in covering my build, but I want to cover it here in this checklist as well. It is the best in slot belt for Pathfinder. It is better than any rare. It is a massive increase to flask uptime and effect. You do want to search for ones that have 3 charges every 3 seconds. On the utility flasks, that's important. The life flasks, you can get away with 1 or 2 charges every 3 seconds, and then the mana flasks, that doesn't matter. And then the other 2 rolls are just fixed to just 100% increased life recovery and 25% increased flask effect. That's all set. It adds about 1200 life per second from your life flask on top of the increased flask effect that scales with Taste of Hate and scales with Progenesis and scales with all of your magic flasks as well. And good ones, like really good ones, will cost less than 10 divines. And I mean like substantially less. Like looking at them right now, if I were to do that, let's just take a look here. I would imagine that there are several that are under 5. We don't care about mana flask charges. Let's just look at utility flasks. Gain. All right, so even if the price were to go up on these quite a bit, the minimum here is 4, 5, 5.5, 6. There's a lot at 6 and 7, and there's a lot available. And it is, I mean, genuinely better than a Headhunter or a Mage Blood for any Pathfinder build. It allows you to use this prefix here on Topaz, Ruby, and I guess Sapphire flasks, although you really want to use Taste of Hate, but it allows you to use this increased effect, reduced duration on Topaz and Ruby flasks and still maintain 100% uptime. It also allows you to maintain 100% uptime on Silver Flask and Quicksilver Flask without like a lot of point investment into flasks on your passive tree. This is really, really amazing. The bits of time where you kind of have a stop and stutter between Quicksilver being on and falling off can really screw with your ability to like dodge mechanics from time to time. It can be really brutal, especially when you're relying on those suffixes to like keep you alive or to keep your damage going. And so having 100% uptime on everything is really, really, really valuable. And having the tattoos, the Tahua Herbalist tattoos, helps with that as well, at least one of them. All right, another thing here. Be sure you're using Immortal Call. It really adds a lot of damage reduction even at lower levels. You just want to level it as much as your strength will allow, basically. You can put it on automation support. That's what I've been doing. I don't really love the added noise when I'm in a hideout, so I do turn it off there. But, you know, it'll give you basically 50% uptime if you have it qualityed up to 20. And that's pretty good, man. That's pretty good uptime on Immortal Call. If you want to not use it in automation support, you can use it in cast when damage taken as well, and that may cast more when you need it, but overall uptime will be significantly lower, and the mana cost will also be a lot higher. All right, spell suppression cap. This is super important. Hitting 100% spell suppression is like a big milestone for your defenses. Using a Devouring Diadem does mean, because it doesn't have evasion, that you can't take this evasion mastery right here that gives you 15% chance to suppress spell damage if you're equipped helmet, body armor, gloves, and boots all have evasion, because your helmet doesn't have evasion on it. So you want to make sure that you're not using that if you're using a diadem. I have seen some people looking at Path of Building. I have seen some people doing that. I've also seen some people using diadem and still spec'd into Eldritch Battery. Whoopsie. I definitely want to make sure you're not doing any of those. You know, basically this just means you have to have 2 pieces of gear that have suppress on them. They don't have to be max rolls, but you will need 2 pieces that have suppress, or you will need a lot of these Ramako Shaman tattoos to compensate. I have this one with 10% and this one also with 10%, and I am a little bit over the cap. And that was why I was able to use several of these Tahua Herbalist tattoos. You also want to make sure you're not getting bamboozled by Revenge of the Hunted. You want to look at this in Path of Building, not in game, because if you're at full health, which you always will be in your hideout, then Revenge of the Hunted will give you a fake extra 10% chance to spell suppress that is not reliable. Definitely don't count on that. All right, I kind of already talked about tattoos, but obviously if you're able to get any amount of int and then throw a bunch of these Rangokurai turtle tattoos, reduced extra damage from crits into those int spots and basically burn all of the excess int and just convert that into more damage reduction from crit, I think that's really, really valuable. And then last but not least, just don't get hit. I know this sounds like simple and reductive, but it is actually true. Just continuing to move will make you dodge a lot of attacks in maps. Standing still to attack is the most dangerous thing you can do 90% of the time. It's important to do. You can't kill guys if you don't stand still and fight them, but if you're worried about dying, you can't play greedy. Fighting around a shrine is like a really good example. I'll pipe in some footage of me getting killed by shrines. If you try to walk directly toward a shrine and just kill everything that's stacked around it, you're probably going to be dead before you've even finished thinking about what you're trying to do. If you keep moving and let the monsters all attack and miss you and then hit them, you'll be good. I'm not Mr. Hardcore. I live fast, I die often, but I will say I don't really even need to look at the screen to stay alive in a lot of situations, and that's not like a brag, it's a philosophy. A huge part of staying alive as a bow build, I'm doing it right now, is just about moving and shooting and shooting and moving and moving and shooting. There is a rhythm to it that you develop over time, and the main times when you get in trouble are when you try to break away from that rhythm and greed some damage on a pack of monsters, and then they blast you 100,000 times in a quarter of a second. Using Caustic Arrow to clear has been really helpful for this as well, for like cutting down on these deaths. You can launch it toward the corner of the screen, and because of the Arrow Nova support, it will often like clear ahead of you, clear off screen, and that is really, really helpful for just like minimizing those deaths. All right, I think that pretty much covers it. I am really enjoying this league. I am still really enjoying Toxic Rain Pathfinder. I think they've done a great job of supporting Necropolis League, and yeah, what can I say? I'm definitely going to continue playing this character and this league, and there'll probably be more updates down the line. Thanks for watching. Bye.